Unit 5, Writing Classes, Topic 5.2, Constructors. Practice makes permanent and builds confidence. Get used to creating UML diagrams to construct classes. This is a basic UML diagram of a class. These will help you construct code for an FRQ Style 2 question. In this lesson, we will focus our attention on constructor methods. Classes usually have more than one constructor. There are usually at least two constructors, a constructor that takes no parameters, also called the default constructor, and a constructor that takes all the parameters necessary for initializing all the instance variables, an overloaded constructor. An object state refers to its attributes and their values at a given time and is defined by instance variables belonging to the object. This creates a has-a relationship between the object and its instance variables. Let's look at this example of a book class. Every book object that is created has a title, genre, author, and number of pages. Constructors are used to set the initial state of an object, which should include initial values for all instance variables. Let's start creating our constructors. Remember, the constructors should be public and have the same name as its class. The first constructor should be the default constructor that has no parameters. In this case, we initialize the instance variables with default values. Title, genre, and author are set to empty strings. The number of pages is set to 0. There may be times I want to instantiate an object with specific values. In order to do so, I will need an overloaded constructor that will take in values used to initialize the instance variables. The parameters should include variables of the same type as the instance variables. The parameter values will then be assigned to the instance variables. Let's look at another example using a sport class. Here we have two instance variables, name and number of athletes. We can also see a default constructor and an overloaded constructor. These constructors set the initial state of the instance variables. The state of the instance variables can be updated using the mutator method setName. How will I know which constructor will be used? The constructor that is used to set the state depends on the way the object is instantiated. Only one constructor will be used to set the initial state of the instance variables. If I have the following instantiation of a sport object called TBD, notice that it is calling the default constructor. If I instantiate another sport object called WP, notice that it has a string and an integer parameters. My computer will look for a constructor that has those parameters in that order. What if I have a situation where not all instance variables are set through parameters? In this case, only the instance variable name is given a value through the parameter, but not the number of athletes. When writing a constructor that only takes in one parameter, the programmer will need to set default values to the other instance variables. In this example, as the programmer, I will need to provide a value for the number of athletes as they are not a part of the parameter list within this constructor. We need to keep all instance variables in mind when creating constructors. Constructor parameters are local variables to the constructor and provide data to initialize instance variables. In this example, string n, an integer number of athletes, only exist within this constructor. With that in mind, do you see any problems in this code? We cannot use n in the method getName. The variable n was local to the overloaded constructor. We cannot use it anywhere else in the class. We need to use the global instance variable name here. Look at this example. Note that there are no constructors in this class. What will happen to the instance variables? What values will they be given? When no constructor is written, Java provides a no argument constructor, and the instance variables are set to default values. What are default values? Well, integers will be set to 0, double values will be set to 0.0, strings and other object variables will be set to null. For this reason, we need to be careful. This may cause a null pointer exception when other methods are called. Let's practice. You are going to write a cow class. The number of times a cow is milked is tracked and updated each time the cow is milked. The following examples illustrate the behavior of the cow class. Write the first part of the cow class. You need to determine the necessary instance variables and constructors. Do not write the methods at this time. Your implementation must be consistent with the specification and the given examples. You might want to start by finding any instantiations of an object to see what parameters are necessary. These are going to be values for instance variables. This line of code is an instantiation. The constructor cow takes in two string parameters, Holstein and moo. Are there any accessor methods that might give you an idea of necessary instance variables? You have getSound, getType, and getNumber of milkings. You might notice that getSound will output the string moo, getType will output the string Holstein, getNumber of milkings outputs 1 and later 3. With that information, you'll be able to come up with some instance variables. Type of cow, which is of type string, and its initial state is set by the parameter. Another instance variable sound of type string that is also set by the parameter. And number of milkings, which is of type integer. Now, you might need to infer information based on what was given. So, what would be the initial value of number of milkings? What makes sense? In this case, it should initially be set to 0. What might your starter code look like? You should have instance variables and constructors. This is one way your starter code for the cow class could look like. Notice, this is an advanced AP topic that will be explored in future units. Constructors are used to set the initial state of an object by initializing its instance variables. The examples above have instance variables that are of primitive types, but you can have other objects or reference types as instance variables. We will see more examples like this in later lessons. Once again, we will explore this in more detail in future lessons. When a mutable object is a constructor parameter, the instance variable should be initialized with a copy of the referenced object. In this way, the instance variable is not an alias of the original object, and methods are prevented from modifying the state of the original object.